Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the final event in our 2022 RiverWatch Fall Speaker Series. For those who are not familiar with the Illinois RiverWatch Network, RiverWatch is a citizen science organization that trains volunteers to monitor water quality in their own communities. The mission of RiverWatch is to safeguard the future of Illinois rivers and streams through stewardship, education, and sound science. Before we get started, I'm going to ask that you keep your microphones muted during the presentation to limit distractions. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so if you have a question along the way, you can either put it in the chat box to be answered at the end, or you can save the question to ask aloud. Tonight, we welcome Peggy Doty. Peggy received her Bachelor of Science in Zoology with a specialization in wildlife management from Southern Illinois University, and a Master of Education from Northern Illinois University. Peggy has spent 20 years with the University of Illinois Extension, and her current position is as a natural resources, environment, and energy educator, serving Boone, DeKalb, and Ogle counties. Tonight, Peggy will be talking about the steps that a middle school STEM club took to address flooding concerns in their own community. And with that, I would like to welcome Peggy Doty.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you can see what I see. It's been one of those technological days where even the tech guys were confused. So, it's a big one. I'm coming to you from Northern Illinois. I work for Extension and I cover Boone, DeKalb, and Ogle counties. I've had the pleasure of both Hannah and Danielle being up here, so at least somebody knows where I am in the far north. And this, Hannah had asked if I could do a presentation, and I was very excited because I haven't had much time to process the actions of our last school year. So I thought it'd be fun to share this adventure with you in the form of mostly pictures, because it's just exciting to see young people. So a little bit about what this is. I'll see if I can walk my way through my own slides here. So I've been with Extension for 23 and a half years. I'm part of a state team, and I've tried forever to get everybody on board on water. So we're very eclectic on my team, and we all have our specialties, but I thought water is what we should all be wrapped around. So I gave up on that. And now I'm focusing on doing that in my own neighborhood and then statewide in a few ways. One, locally, I'm part of a land use committee through the DeKalb County Community Foundation. So you'll see on the slide, there's our little watershed sign. We have these signs posted everywhere any human being crosses the Kish. And we just got some more for even further out, so that people are naturally educated, incidentally educated, whatever that is. And our little recommendations of the land use are listed there to reduce flooding, new and retrofitting stormwater, stabilizing stream banks, etc. And it's about trying to, we have a tiny kind of a mini grant opportunity, and we are working on our watersheds through EPA grants. And then anybody in those watersheds can apply for these mini grants to hopefully increase our water education, water management in DeKalb County. Beyond that, you'll see our little vials there. Danielle and Hannah would recognize those. Years ago in 1997, I was a RiverWatch monitor and had a blast with it. And then when we had the opportunity, with the help of the Forest Preserve, getting a little more help on board for me, we've started doing RiverWatch again in that tiny little nature center at the bottom. That's our little end of the road space in a Forest Preserve in DeKalb County. And I put on here, after listening to a North Central Water Region presentation, and it's posted there, that quote, "My goal before I retire." So I say that lightly, because how do you retire when your heart is totally enveloped in what you're doing? I'm focusing from here on out on water. Now, that doesn't mean I won't teach wildlife. My background is in wildlife management. You can tie everything to water, though. So my goal is to start educating our youngest people, so when they get to the county board and we have a water issue in our aquifer, they don't have to go back to school to figure out what to do. They can just act based on research and knowledge. So I decided I need to start educating my, the elementary students In this case, this story is about our middle school. So that's just a little bit about where I'm coming from. I can't do enough. If I had all the money in the world, we would have a direct bat line from NGREC to me, because I really want to be a part of change when it comes to water quality, water quantity here in the US. So in the beginning, it just strangely happened. It was all supposed to be, if you would say. This is my friend Jody. She's a middle school science teacher. She reached out through someone at the Farm Bureau. They connected with me. She wanted somebody to read her Keystone project for her master's work. And I said, well, it's nothing I've ever done before. I'm not sure I'm the person. What's it about? And she said, it's a unit on watersheds for 6th grade. I said, oh, yes, I think we need to speak. And I'd love to see that. Thinking really more that I could snitch some ideas from a real teacher, because I am a professional teacher, not a public trained teacher. And we got together and we hit it off, and she did a great job. We talked about it, and she had mentioned other things she was doing. She does a STEM club, etc. And then I came into a little bit of funding, and the way I got that funding, it's not in my unit. I've been doing this job, like I said, for 23 and a half years, and I almost feel too guilty going to the same people over and over. Please fund this, please fund that. So I looked in the watershed, and then I looked beyond the watershed into our sand aquifer in the northeast corner of the state of Illinois. If you aren't aware, we are in a very concerned position. The drawdown in our sand aquifer is serious, and it's not recharging anymore. Will County, where Joliet is, has now added enough industry that the drawdown is, I think I just misspelled beginning as I'm looking at that. That's funny. The drawdown is such that it's not recharging. And now Joliet is looking at millions of dollars of infrastructure to get water from the lake to provide for these industries, but it doesn't fix our problem here in Northeast Illinois. So I went to a grantor from someone who knew my love of water and interest. I was connected to an anonymous grantor in Wheaton, which isn't in DeKalb County at all, and basically sold them on the fact that they're in the same boat I am. And if we don't start teaching our children all about water quality and quantity, we're going to be in a pickle more so than we already are. So long story short, I got the grant. And when I got the grant, they wanted, U of I is who I work for. And U of I always wants a certain percent of all big grants. And they write themselves in. Well, my grantor, being anonymous, doesn't have a website and doesn't have it written in their website that they do not pay administration fees. So I almost lost a $75,000 grant because it wasn't in the website. There was no website. And when they finally said, okay, fine, we don't need, it's okay. We won't take an additional $7,500 for admin fees. They came to me and said, so what would you do with the additional funding? And I was totally caught off guard. I have a hard time going to Walmart to spend money on poster board. I'm a tightwad when it comes to spending because Extension is nonprofit, basically. We are just out there, turning over stones for money. We're not the campus. And so when they said, what else would you do? I threw out, I'll start a club, a watershed club. Yeah. And, additional money, not all $7,500, but I got additional money for that and some other suggestions. And that's how this started. And this is a picture you'll see at the end. And this was Miss Jody, my friend that I met. This is her G-Force Girls STEM Club. And I went to her and said, I've got cash. Can I infiltrate your club? And just wherever you have a hole, I can throw in something about water. And she said, absolutely. I'd love to work with you. Total luck. 1 mile from my house. And it was the best experience all of last year. And here's the timeline, just to give you an overview before I fill your head with photos. The G-Force had a fall group and a spring group. Because it was so big, they were concerned about having them all in club once a week. This is a weekly club. I went in 26 different weeks of this club, even if I wasn't teaching about water, because I wanted the girls to know I was all in. And so we had a group in the fall who did this, the majority of the beginning of what you're going to see. And then the spring group, the way I sold it to them, and we redid some of the education material. I said, here's the plan that group one came up with. It's your job to sell it to the public. It's your job to let people know the information. And they ran with it. and became the market media of the overall plan. So that was exciting. You'll see the little drop down. We did have a planting day at the end of the school year, which was a day. It was the first day they didn't have to be at school. It was end of break, ready for summer break, and I had a huge crowd show up. I thought nobody's going to come, nobody, because they're out of school. And I had a huge group come. I was so excited. And I'll share that. And then there's this little encore. I did hold a watershed camp. We had a few of the G-Force girls sign up, and that's all that mattered. I'm a big proponent of the starfish story. You know, you taught the story of tossing that starfish back in the water when there's hundreds stranded on the beach, but it matters to that one, right? So on we go. So just so you're aware, combining support. I'm a member of Environmental Education Association of Illinois. I highly recommend really inexpensive membership and lots of information and lots of opportunities for education, including now the Joint Earth Force. They've taken earthforce.org, has actually 15 states, and Illinois, EEI is the holding center for the Earth Force Illinois, as well as the RISE Challenge. Those two work together in an interesting way. If the facilitator, in this case it was me, takes the Earth Force training on how to walk kids through, an issue to a civic engagement, because if the facilitator takes the training, then there's more money available because of that through some funds, including some EPA funds. So I actually took the training twice. I'm not sure why, once online and once at the conference. So I was well trained. It wasn't necessary, but I guess they wanted me to support the whole. And then the RISE Challenge, Illinois is housed, and that's where our other funding came from. So they just had a change of executive director. They're waiting. There is a new person in charge of the RISE Challenge. So you may want to look into it and then ask and see where they're at. They're trying to finish off the monies from last year to get on to this year. But this is where it started for us. And it gave me, as a non-public school teacher, a nice format. And I'm not going to give you all of that, but just bits and pieces. I stole this from one of the trainings, and increased understanding of natural hazards. If you use Earth Force, if you use the RISE Challenge, it has to be around a natural disaster. And in our case, that natural disaster is flooding where we are, extreme flooding, and it happens every spring. So that was pretty easy call. Experience in environmental issue investigation, experience developing real life solutions, which these girls did, increased efficacy in civic involvement. We made it to the civic engagement piece, and then they were recognized, which was super exciting. So I'm not going to read through these, but this is one of the pathways just to help. I'm very visual, so it was really easy for me when I could see all these story maps on how to get where I needed to go. We discussed the natural hazards. They picked flooding. They knew that was a problem. These girls actually remember when sometimes it floods so badly at our river, which is the south branch of the Kishwaukee River in DeKalb County. It floods the road, and the kids who have to walk from town can't get to school until they take a bus back and forth across the flooded waterway so that the kids can get past the water safely. And so they knew water was the issue. We defined our community, and we went from the DeKalb County down to Sycamore, Illinois, down to the neighborhood, clear down to their school before it was over, because they had to make a decision on how far out they could do their job and they could educate. And make a difference. And they realized it was big. It took a few weeks to get it down because they were thinking pretty big. And then you can see the rest of those pieces of implementation. So that was fun. That whole defining community took way longer than I think the teacher could hardly handle. Teachers are used to making sure they know something immediately. And this whole process is a facilitation. If you don't get to the civic engagement, you don't. It's okay. You can still get funding from RISE for the proposal, and you can get more funding if it's implemented, but you don't necessarily have to get there. So it's a process. So I threw this picture in. Oh, I don't know whose it is. I apologize. I grabbed it, but I didn't have a picture of our flood, but that's what it looks like every year here in parts of Sycamore. So that's our natural disaster. So I decided to start, of course, with education first. So we did the watershed model, and that I did repeat in the spring, because that's a great overview of what we're talking about. And then we made water filters, which was already built into the STEM activity. So I didn't have to worry about that. She had all that going on. And just as to keep this not be too long, overview water quality, but really those are some of the things we discussed as we taught them, as I gave them information. We did wetland metaphors. We did you'll see some field tripping down to the space. But we did try to help them understand why this was such a big deal. And none of them, have had that. They're only 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I did a wetland loss activity that I made up one year. I took the major watershed map that's outdated now, and I put 100 pennies on it. And then I had the teacher take off the over 90 pennies for the wetland loss in Illinois since Illinois became a state, right? So that was devastating. They were just out of their wit. There was no certain space they had to lay the pennies, but if you notice, they kind of went along the Illinois River. You can kind of see that. They were definitely looking at water, thinking about it, and then they just got all their wetlands all wiped out. So that made a huge impact, because in the end, what we're going to deal with in the end is a wet detention space. We also, the gal in the left picture, the taller one, we worked with Northern Illinois University Women in Engineering. They came in. That was already scheduled with the STEM. I'm telling you, I lucked out so much. So we were able to encourage the girls, having an all-girls engineering club. Multiple different girls, young women came multiple times. And then I didn't get to go on the trip. They got to go visit the engineering department and take a tour with them. And the lady on the right is the co-teacher, and they are working on their water filters. If you ever do water filters with children, be prepared. They want to pour it through until it is completely clear. It's crazy how focused they get. So then we took a hike, and what came out of one of the girls' mouths was, "Oh my gosh, it's all our fault." Their school in the middle is ginormous, but it's in the middle, and I don't know if I have a pointer. I don't know if you can see that. That's their building across the horizon right there. And all this is mowed. They're measuring, trying to figure out slopes. They're looking at the space. What they discovered was they didn't need a community any bigger than their middle school property. And they had learned so much, they were just broken. They couldn't believe it. And when they figured out there's no way they could stick a tiny rain barrel on that ginormous building, they went to work trying to figure out what else they wanted to focus on. It was super exciting. I have to say, I did so little and they did so much. So one of the things that they loved, and this came out of Earth Force, I believe, it's this root cause. So basically you fill it out, and it helps them understand that in the case of litter, which was one of their big problems they saw down at the river, which was right there at the end of the property where we were just walking, they saw trash, and one girl evidently near her home sees trash all over, and she was just adamant the whole year. Well, they figured out that litter and people weren't the root cause. The root cause was there was no place to put the trash on the walking path. And so this was a really good experiment for them, and it was good for those visual learners. So here's ours, right, up on the magic board. My best tree, not the best, but the best I could do. So we talked about water running off the school property, litter in the kish, the path for flooding. The environmental concern, the main concern is flooding. And we built our root causes. You can't see them in this picture very well, but we built it from here. And it helped them make sense of it all. And it wasn't complete yet. They were still going through ideas. So this was one of the pictures that we got. Look at this. And those of you who are wildlife people, this is a McDonald's standard coffee cup. I would say it's probably a small since it's not Starbucks. This is a beaver footprint. And it's like he just stepped right on it, even though the cup probably blew in right after, who knows. But the kids were like, okay, something's got to give, right? They were really furious that the beaver came in contact with McDonald's. And then there was the salt problem at their school. There is a gentleman, and this became quite an interesting political tug of war with the girls. The janitor didn't want anyone to fall and get hurt. Evidently, someone had fallen at some point at the school. And now he salted so much that one of the girls actually nearly fell on the salt itself. And so they said, well, why do we have to have so much salt on their own? And we hadn't talked about, the salt and all of the potential, chloride issues. They just went, what about all this salt? I said, what about it? And the drain by my foot, that storm drain, ends up going straight to the Kish. And so they were beside themselves. And that leftover salt on the right was ridiculous. There was a lot of war going on. And I found out that the school is paying like $14,000 a year in salt. And they decided that their ambition was to convince them using the financial aspect of salt. And also, that they just didn't need that much. And they later will learn about salt. Rainfall management at home became an issue. They realized their neighborhood was part of the problem, because if they're full of water in their neighborhood, on the slope that they have from the neighbors to the school to the river. So they became enamored with rain barrels and things they could do on property. And then, of course, they found lots of dog poop on the trail. Root cause, no place to put the dog poop, right? Okay. So if they had bags and they had a place to put it, the potential for more of it ending up not in the water was huge. And then finally, native plants. Their interest in native plants was really exciting. And this is the middle of the picture right there to the right is a detention pond. We discussed detention and retention, and the school is way up there on the horizon, but all the water comes off and goes into this very small, slightly inadequate detention pond. And the older girls remembered they had thrown seeds with somebody from the park district into this detention. And there were plants there, but it wasn't biodiverse. They recognized that there was these huge patches of identical plants. Some did well in the bottom, some did well at the top. So they started learning about the different levels of wet, mesic, and dry native prairie choices, or native plant choices rather. And so this became exciting. And I had 2 different land managers meet me out there separately so that the information we were pulling together really was true. And they agreed. The girls were right. There was a lot of certain good plants, not too many bad plants, but just not the biodiversity they would want, and not enough in the absorption area. So we got busy. And then I found Jamie. She used to be at the Conservation Foundation. I'm not sure where she went. And she had done an adult program that I listened to about watersheds. Now, I loved the slides. I was familiar. And so I asked her, because I thought it would work with the girls. I said, would you be willing to be a female scientist and zoom in with my G-Force Club? And she said, sure. And she supported all their thoughts, but with data. And so now they're looking at it going, wait a minute. So we were right. We can plant certain things. We can deal with runoff, and we can tell people that the sod is not working, and the salt issue is huge. And the girls learned that 12 ounces of salt, so a standard mug of salt, is all you need for 10 square sidewalk squares. So they were all over that. And that really gave them a lot of forward energy. So remember, they're middle schoolers, right? And so they started trying to figure out, they were going to use their science Olympiad. They asked for a table, and they were going to do public education as their first proposal to the RISE Challenge. And this was their starter page, their little piece of paper, which I thought was adorable. And working for the university, I would love to turn my stuff in like that. That would be awesome. And then this is what came of it, the poster and the different things that they had talked about. And this was good for those artistic, the girls who were more artistic, gave them something they could do. And they really jumped on it. So this was their table. They insisted to have giveaways and a drawing. So because we made a proposal to do this, we got money. So our money went toward a rain barrel from our local soil and water conservation district. I'm an associate director on that. We got it for cost. We didn't get it for free. We wanted to pay for it because we had the money. And we did get some plants. Eventually, we did get plants donated. Many of them, and we paid wholesale prices is what we did. And then they wanted a place for dog poop. So we got this dog poop thing that's going to sit out on the path. And we did get a ginormous concrete trash can. Yeah, no, juniors aren't happy. I always forget that part. So the reason being is it's windy out there, and they didn't want it to be get all the litter in one place and then have it blow all over. So the trash can's not in this picture because it was housed in a dark closet waiting to be decided on which part of the path it would make and who was going to empty it. They gave away poop bags for dogs. And one of the little girls, when she left, she said, I'm taking one of these home to my neighbor. They never pick up their dog poop. And then they had eco pens. They wanted something that was compostable when it was done, was minimal in waste, and would get across the whole consumerism piece. So we gave away some little eco pens. So you can see on the left, there's the first square. And then they had it actually, the men are standing on it. They had the line under the one man's foot goes 10 squares down, and they used white paper punch holes for the salt so it wouldn't hurt the floor. And they had a mug, and Grace, the little girl on the right with the skirt on, was doing this whole Vanna White thing all night. All you need is this 12-ounce mug of salt for this 10 square sidewalk squares. I mean, over and over she did it. It was adorable. And they were on it. These two girls were the only two of three. One is not in the picture right now, available that night. And they were my youngers. So it was pretty exciting. We do have fun. They are middle school kids. And I don't know where that picture is. I'm hoping it comes up. Then one of the girls works in the media department at the middle school. And she said, we need to do a PSA, and wrote the PSA. She was very high energy. And so the girls got to talk in pairs, as you can see on the right, through different parts of this PSA, and created this whole thing on, I can't even read it. We're the G-Force Club. We're doing the Rise Challenge. We plan on creating this wetland detention basin, etc. It was awesome. And there it is. Scientists can be funny. The girls got a hold of the guy next to us doing musical instruments with medical gloves and straws. So in the end, they're still middle schoolers. I had to throw that in for you because they were just delightful. They were just too funny. And girls are scientists. And that was the biggest piece of this, is these girls could be part of the answer to solving some of our water concerns, how we see water, how our municipalities deal with water. These young women could be on the county board one day. And here they are after school in a club by choice, trying to figure out what to do about things. I threw this in here because I went to a conference, and there was a company, I can't even read it now, the Cardno company is changing names. They're a native plants group. They do landscape stuff. And they had these pens to give away. So I came back with a pen it's a pen and a tool for, using on your phone. And I came back with those. And I came back with these flip out cross-referencing plant guides. So it was bees, wasps, butterflies, etc. And you would pick your plant based on what you were interested in. And then I had another resource where they could then, in another bigger fold out, and I said, now you need to cross-reference that with the soil type. Is it wet? Is it music? Is it dry? And the thing that I wasn't prepared for, because I'm nearly 58 years old, and I had these great little things. They each got one. And one little girl said, okay, Miss Peggy, here, take this. I said, well, don't you need it for cross-referencing? She goes, no, I found the PDF online. I'm like, oh, I didn't have to bring home one for everybody. I only needed one because they have their Chromebooks. And so they used it and they cross-referenced, and they made their own plant list as to where those plants would go. And they made a wish list depending on what we could get. And that was huge. And there's the PSA crew. It's just, they're so cute, and they did such a nice job of speaking, and they supported each other. And then it was the time for the Rise Challenge. We made the top 5. Both proposals made the top 5 in the state of those who put in proposals. And I will say, there may have only been 5. I don't know, but I don't care. I was so excited for them. So they were going to meet with judges from across. I think one was from Colorado, one was definitely from U of I, and they got to meet and talk about their projects. They were the scaredest little girls I've ever seen. They got so nervous that in the background of this first picture, we were writing things to remember while the judges were speaking. I was nervous. The teachers are over here fully like, oh, here we go. They got treated to lunch, snacks, beverages before this. And the kids who could get out of class, which you can see were very few, attended and got to give their answers and information about their proposals and why. And then the judges decide at that time, and they got second place for their native planting of the dysfunctional detention basin. And they got fifth place for their science Olympiad education. I did so little. I am not taking credit for this at all. I just fed them stuff and they ate it and they created it. When they did the PSA, I walked in for club and Jody goes, "Come on, you got to see what they're doing." I'm like, "What is it?" And they had already typed it up. They were doing it. I got teary. I mean, just the fact that these kids, I want to retire someday, and sometimes you lose a little hope in the world. Not anymore. These girls were on it. And then the civic engagement happened. They actually took it all the way from issue to civic engagement. If you look into the Earth Force, if you do go to earthforce.org, you can see the 6 steps. Again, doesn't mean you're going to get there, but we did. And in this picture on the left is one of the master naturalists of mine from DeKalb County. I facilitate a master naturalist program. In the middle is a different science teacher who was so excited about this, and he now is taking over the STEM club with one of the teachers left. So he's in there now. He was so excited to help. This was a Teachers Institute day, so a bunch of teachers came out. A mom, a little sister came out, and I think we had a grandma. And so we also had some help. The head of grounds for the school district is the gentleman on the tractor. He mowed the bad stuff that morning away from us. We had some thistles on the hill, and he actually mowed it into his own FFA cropland right next to it. In the middle, we have one of my master naturalists who happens to be on NPR, Sue Stevens, up here. And she came out because it was posted a lot of information on NPR. And then the 2 guys in the middle that were looking at where to drill the holes on Forest Preserve. So we had a lot. We had program coordinators from Extension, like I said, many master naturalists. And it was super exciting to see everybody, and the girls felt supported and validated. And here's just some more. Remember, this is the first day of no school. So I was pretty excited. And so this little girl came, and she wore her very special little slippers, her little slip-on, almost, they weren't ballerina shoes, they were close. But I thought it was so adorable because here we are working on the next generation too, right? We're the younger of that generation. And so she helped plant, and that was the end of our civic engagement. And this is where I say thank you. However, I want to share with you a little encore because I got excited because I thought, we got people here, we'll show them. The encore was a watershed camp. Now, remember the starfish story from the beginning. We only had 3 of the girls that could make it because silly me forgets that right when summer's, in the middle of summer, you get softball camp, volleyball camp, band camp. Yeah, we landed on a bad week. But look at the difference. And what were they teaching? But our RiverWatch methodologies, like how to do this. It's not the right time of year. They still found some things, of course, things that like dragonflies that are there, more than a year. But the involvement and the interest was insane. And the one girl in the middle, Izzy, she's a freshman now. So now I have one in high school. And in our high school, there's a watershed class. She has to take biology her freshman year in order to take the class her sophomore year. So she signed up for biology so she can join the watershed course for credit in her sophomore year. So that is super exciting. And that's Jody on the left, my fave teacher. That's a scientist, and yes, pink with white polka dots over there, still looking for things. And that it couldn't be any better. It's just bright. So my last slide, I get to go back this Thursday is the first day back to G4 STEM Club. I have some carryovers that are interested in the water. We're going to review last year. We're going to visit our site, see what did well over summer, what didn't, see if there's any, casualties. And then I have some money from that initial grant, and we are going to figure out how to develop small water kits for families and potentially It would be fourth grade families. We're going to look at the NGSS, and I'm pretty sure it's going to land fourth graders. Where I could do some education in those fourth grade classrooms. The kits would be developed by the middle school students, and hopefully somehow we could figure out. It's always tricky to move kids around without, they have to be in a yellow bus or with families, and to deliver those kits to our fourth grade classrooms that are in our Title I schools that may not have the opportunity to buy a water saving shower head, and other things I haven't thought of, but I'm sure Hannah and Danielle would be more than happy to help me think of things I could put in those kits that would make sense. Maybe the salt detection kits, or anything that would help educate our families. So with that, I say thank you for listening. I know that's a lot. I tend to be like taking a drink out of a fire hose, but I'm just so excited how that turned out. And it's an example of what you could do. And even if you don't have the money, if you have some support, these kids are just open. They're just open books. They want to learn more and more, and they are our future. So thank you so much.
Peggy, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. This has been excellent. Definitely inspirational to hear the story of how these students started from learning about watersheds and water and turning it into, how they can make a difference in their own community. I'm going to go ahead and see. Let's see. Okay, so Hannah had a question asking, were there any environmental issues that were harder for the kids to wrap their heads around, or a problem that you hoped that they would notice on their own, but then they didn't?
I was kind of surprised because I just kept giving them information. And I think the key is taking them out to visually see it. Because when they turned around and looked at their school, there was just a slight slope, and they knew I had told them that sod does not, infiltrate water. And they just looked at it, and that's when they went, it's our fault, meaning the school.
Right.
And I didn't tell them that. This was a pretty amazing group to put it together. The thing that I wish I would have had been on top of sooner and should have thought to reach out, but there was, this is one thing of many things we do, right? Is the salt. If we could have followed that and safely gotten to where, things are flowing down into the water and done some salt, some monitoring chloride. Actually, I wrote down your registration is on your calendar for the water chloride. I'm hoping I have time. That would have been something they would, I didn't teach them and they didn't know. We did talk about the salt, and finally I kind of led them to, where is it going? They were just mad because there was so much of it. But I think they hit it. And I think when Jamie spoke and they were looking at each other like, these are all the things we've been talking about. And the teachers really have a hard time not handing them information. This is why you should know this, and I was like, oh, so here's a wetland metaphor. Here's, but she really concreted even the dog poop. I didn't know he was going to do, and they had already noticed the people walk their dogs and there's all this poop out here, I think the sixth graders definitely needed the seventh and eighth graders, and the seventh graders needed the eighth. It's an age thing. I don't think it would go as well with just sixth graders, but they all were helping each other. And there was one girl in the slides, and somebody said, well, she's only here because she doesn't have anywhere else to go. So I don't think she's very interested. I said, perfect, because she comes from a historically underserved audience, and she comes from an area of here demographically. And if that grabs her, and she was in the microscope, she was like giving ideas, and she was, so they know. I didn't know her, they did, and by not knowing her and then when they said that, I'm like, this is the perfect place for her then, right? Because if she doesn't know where else to go, we got her. Whatever the musical didn't get her, whoever else didn't get her, we did, So I was really excited about that.
Very good. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you want. Yeah, so I was wondering, I know that you said that one of the things you're going to be doing with them coming up here is looking at that detention basin to see how it's done. Have you been there? Have you seen have there been improvements in the condition of it, or?
I haven't, I've only gone out to see that the plants weren't totally dug up by something. And you race out there and okay, stuff looks kind of alive. Oh, good, a rain. I don't have to think about this. The school said they would take care of watering for us. You have to have a lot of people on board, for those initial years, but we did get a decent amount of rain this summer, which will help them. And so I'm excited Thursday. I don't think we're going to get to walk down there on Thursday because it's the first time. They just met last Thursday to get started, and then I'm coming in this Thursday. But reviewing, seeing what that non-Qualtrics evaluation. What do you remember? I'm going to try to take some notes to see a year, not a whole year later, because some of them didn't come to the second, weren't in that second session. They didn't come till the planting. So it will be interesting to see how much did they take in and what do they remember? Why did we even do that? It'll kill me if they're going, I don't know. So, but they are kids. I just know those few that came to the watershed camp, which I designed just for them. They were just, it was awesome. It was really nice to have an older group of kids. I usually get the youngers, and I'm not sure why I ever did watershed, water camp with 9 to 11-year-olds after having middle schoolers. It was like, oh, I didn't have to yell, don't run. They're too cool to run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you mentioned the road salt and chloride and definitely, as you mentioned, if you can make it to the training, great. If you can't make it, we can absolutely still talk about, what opportunities there might be. The methods that we use are fairly simple and student friendly. So
excellent.
Be glad.
I want to get the high school watershed club aware of this too, and see if any of it's not a club, it's a class, and see if they're doing anything with it too, because that's a great thing for their age group. So I'm definitely looking for activities. If I do K through 8 curriculum wise, that's part of this grant, is I'm trying to develop an in-classroom that I and volunteers take to the kids, just a 2-visit kind of, here's the information, the next one's an activity. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm going to give credit to every single thing I can find that a lot of, and you may have noticed this, a lot of curriculum out there wasn't written by people who ever have worked with a child. So I want the ideas, I have a lot of my own, but I want to develop it for K through 5, maybe 6, 7, 8 combined. And then I want some things for the high school kids. And I'm thinking more monitoring for them, some civic engagement and some citizen science efforts where they could be doing it and sending it to, where it matters, right. RiverWatch, of course. And so that's kind of my thought for that, but I got to get all that done this winter and offer that next spring. So I may be talking to you sooner than later.
That would be lovely. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Peggy, do you have any last nuggets that you want to share tonight?
No, but I'm so happy to have it was fun to review it. I'm glad I committed, and I didn't feel like doing a real professional bullet pointed PowerPoint. I just wanted you to see the joy and enjoy the pictures. And I hope that was enough, because it was like, I just was grabbing pictures once my computer allowed me to. So this is awesome. And it also puts my mindset ready to see what they're going to do for this semester. I'm only going to be in there for the rest of the fall. Okay. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It's a commitment.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the great presentation. This concludes our speaker series events for now, but we'll be back in the new year with a lineup of 3 or 4 more speakers. In the meantime, please keep an eye on our Facebook page for the opening of nominations for our 2022 RiverWatch Volunteer Awards. Starting around Thanksgiving, we will be accepting nominations in 5 categories, including Young Scientist. So that, I think there's some kids that I might have heard about now that might be, eligible for that. Volunteer of the Year and Inspiration Award. Those are some of our categories. You can find information on the eligibility and on past winners, including Peggy, on our webpage. And then thank you to all of you for joining us this year, and have a great night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.